السلام عليكم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. It is such an honor to be here today. This is my first time speaking Kansas City, and I was so excited when I got invited. Thank you for inviting me to an event that is fundraising for a project of this magnitude that really shows me that you are all here because you believe in this higher mission, in this purpose. When I see projects like this, I feel so inspired because they are truly visionary. And you've all given up your Saturday night and this gorgeous weather to be here, to be at this place with your brothers and sisters. I think one of the reasons that we're all here is because we need each other. We need community. We need gatherings like this to help us through the deep grief and heartache and rage that we are all feeling after witnessing 2 years of a genocide that's being broadcast on our phones and our TVs and our TV stations. And I think that we're also here because we want to make a difference. We don't want to fall into despair. We don't want our grief to be the whole story. We want to build something. We want to leave a legacy. And so the question then becomes, how do we do that? How do we leave a legacy in this country? And some have argued that the best way is to simply keep our heads down and work hard and hope that we someday will fit in, that we'll someday be fully accepted by the dominant society, by the dominant groups, that we will, like other people before us, we will ascend a hierarchy of America's socioeconomic ladder. And in that, we will have succeeded. We will have left a mark as American Muslims. But is this really our path? Is this how our Prophet ﷺ would want us to think of ourselves and our definition of success? Because if we reflect on his life, he was born basically, for all intents and purposes, as a member of Meccan royalty. His bloodline was nobility in his society. And yes, of course, he was an orphan, and we often emphasize that, which is of course true. But that doesn't change the nobility of his bloodline. And that meant something to the Arabs. And it was his family ties that actually protected him for a very long time until his uncle passed away. And the power was then moved to the other branch of the same family, but those who opposed his mission. So why I'm explaining this is because Rasulullah ﷺ did not need to ascend a hierarchy. He was already at the top of it. But he came with a message that unraveled an unjust hierarchy that he happened to actually be at the top of. He disintegrated asabiyya and replaced it with a completely new, unheard of system of governance since then and before that. One where might didn't make right and bloodline didn't make right. That everyone was held to account under the Almighty. Poor and rich, men and women, black and white, Arab and Persian. Everyone was held to the same standard of right and wrong and rule of law. He didn't seek to fit in, to get along in a system that was broken. He worked every day of his life to rebuild that broken system. And so we often hear, or we often, when we're studying the seerah, we hear that Rasulullah ﷺ was offered power. But by really studying the kind of society and the history of the Arabs, what we realize is that by being offered to be king of the Arabs, he wasn't being given the most powerful position that existed in that society. He was being offered a position that had never existed before. Uniting all the Arabs under one leader was unheard of. They were very independent tribes and had no unifying leader. So he would have been given more power than existed in any man's hand at the time. And all the privilege and perks and luxuries that go along with that kind of power, and he refused. Because what he was teaching us is that success to him and making a difference and his impact was not ever going to be achieved simply through proximity to earthly power. It was going to be a completely different path, one that had not been forged before. And so when we think about how we should view our role, it's one where we are building, not just blending in. Where we are reimagining, not just resigning ourselves to the status quo and asking, how do I climb the ladder? It's an approach that challenges unjust structures and crafts new ones, not just one that teaches us how to better climb them. We cannot adjust to the unjust. We need the spiritual courage to stand up and stand out, not try to shrink and deform ourselves to fit in. Now, what do we do to make this a reality? What are the steps? Here's my recommendation. After studying the American Muslim community now for almost 20 years. The first step is deeply spiritual and internal. It requires a deep, unapologetic love for our messenger, alayhi salatu wassalam. But how do you love a man you've never met and you don't know? How do you love someone you don't know? It requires us, as a condition of faith, to study his example, to learn his character, to understand how he responded in different situations, ones with his family, ones with his companions, and sometimes, most importantly, the ones with his enemies. How did Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam exhibit and model how to be a perfect human being, how to be a mercy to all the worlds? And when we do that, we have to do our very best to emulate him in the ways that we normally think, and we talk about the sunnah and how he dressed and how he wore his hair and his beard. And all those things are beautiful and important. But also in the sunnah of how he conducted himself when he was weak and he was strong. How he conducted himself at home and in the marketplace. How he dealt with the most powerful and the least. These are the things we must study and emulate if we have any chance of fulfilling his dream for us, his mission for us. The second step of this process, though, might even be harder than the first, which is that we must love ourselves and each other. We must heal and unite as a community. We must be an ummah, a true ummah, and not a usba. Now, what do I mean by that? I've had the wonderful pleasure of studying Surah Yusuf for the past 2 years. I was discussing it with my teacher, Imam Muhammad Majid, who is the Imam at the Adams Center in Northern Virginia. And we have a podcast where we were talking about it called Quran Conversations. And in that discussion, we talked about the difference between an ummah and a usba. And the word usba appears in Surah Yusuf twice. It's how his brothers describe themselves. In the first case, they say, why is our father favoring our brother when we are usba? When we are strong and we are a group together, we are like a band of brothers. Usba comes from the same root as asabiyya, the same root as asaba. Asabiyya meaning tribalism, asaba meaning a gang or a cult. So it means a group that is banded together for their own interests. Yes, they are strong, but they're strong for me and not you. The in-group against the out-group. It's built on a dehumanization of the other and a glorification of the in-group. If that is sounding like any specific so-called country that is raining havoc and terror on the people of Gaza, it's because that's exactly what drives Zionism, is asabiyya. Asabiyya coming from this concept of usba. It means a band that comes together not based on any universal principle, but one where we are banded together for the strength of the group against whoever is not the group. And everyone else is our enemy or our tool. And when they don't want to be our tool, they become our enemy. That's the only that's only two categories that exist outside our usba. It's a kind of group that doesn't allow for dissent. If you disagree, you become targeted. Now, what does an ummah look like? An ummah is a group that is banded not together, not like this, but all hanging on to the same rope of Allah. What's the difference? You imagine these two visuals. One where we're all clasping each other's hands, but there's nothing grounding us in any principle except us against the world. The other visual is we're not holding each other's hands. We're holding the same rope of Allah, grounding us in universal principles where I will fight for your right to worship different from me. I will defend you against my brother if he's wrong. It's one where justice is the core value and not me and my brother against the world. An ummah is one where we are bound together by the principles of our faith, where we are not together simply to be strong, but we are together to be strong for a purpose. So the second thing we need to do is to love ourselves and love each other to build an ummah, not a usba. And I want to explain something very important. Because when people hear love each other, they sort of think that I'm denying the problems that exist in our community, or I'm, romanticizing our community or making it into some ideal thing that it's not. And that's the last thing I'm doing. I'm actually someone who studies our community in a great deal of detail. I am fully aware of our strengths and our struggles. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't love each other. Loving the believers is part of our faith. It's a dua that we say. Let there not be in our hearts any animosity toward another believer. It doesn't mean we don't have a lot of work to do within our community to heal and to stand up against our own transgressions against each other. But it means we must love ourselves and each other. And I say this because don't take it for granted. As someone who studies American Muslims, there is a problem now, a growing problem of especially young Muslims having a negative view of Islam and Muslims. When we talk about Islamophobia, it exists among Muslims themselves where they're endorsing anti-Muslim ideas and anti-Muslim stereotypes. We will not leave a positive impact on our society unless we unite and we think well of each other and ourselves. And part of that is to build our identity as servants of Allah. Now, this sounds so obvious, like I'm up here stating what everybody already knows, but I actually want to go in a little bit more depth. What is an identity exactly? An identity is how you think of yourself when you're making decisions. This is what I mean by that. When people vote, we just had an election where poor whites voted for a billionaire who was going to raise taxes, who was going to lower taxes on the rich. They weren't going to be helped in terms of their economics at all, but they voted for him. When people vote, and the best strategists know this, they don't vote based on their interests. One party understands that, the other one doesn't. You can figure out which one. People vote based on their identity. The question they ask isn't which one of these options is going to be better for my interest. The question deep down that they're asking when they're at the polls is, what does a person like me, who does a person like me want as president? A person like me, however they define that, and they behave according to that identity. Now, what happens when we teach our children that they are weak or that they are liars? When we say you're a liar, we're building an identity where when they ask themselves how they should behave in a certain situation, they say to themselves, what does a person like me do in this situation? And if what's playing in their brain is, I'm a liar, guess what they're going to do? They're going to behave according to their identity. In fact, psychologists say that identity is the single strongest driver of our behavior, how we think of ourselves. So we have to build an identity where our primary driver is we are servants of the merciful. And we build that in our children. We make them not just proud, but truly internalize the idea that they are Muslims. Where when they're making decisions, they say, what would a Muslim do? What would a follower of Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam do in this moment? And it's a very different result than when they're thinking of themselves as the last, negative thing that their parents may have called them that week. Let's think about how we speak to each other, ourselves, and our children, because we have to build these strong, positive identities. We also need to know how we can best contribute. So once we have our internal, soul, our heart, our internal state solid, we have to now ask about our intellect and our skills and our education and say, how can we best contribute? Not everyone is going to contribute the same. Not everyone is a doctor or a social media influencer. Not everyone is teaching at an Islamic school. Not everyone is a sheikh. But you for sure have a way to contribute to make this ummah successful. One of the most beautiful stories that illustrates this point is there was a man, a Sahaba, who came to Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam and told him, I want to help with the effort of the Battle of Badr. I want to be there, I want to help. But I am not a fighter. I don't know how to wield a sword. And if I'm paraphrasing now, and I'm afraid, I'm scared to fight. It's just not something I know how to do. But I still want to help and I still want to contribute. And so Rasulullah ﷺ asked him, what do you do? What do you know how to do? And he said, I write verse. I write poetry. So Rasulullah ﷺ said to him, well then I want you to write poetry that glorifies and praises Allah and praises His Prophet and ridicules the Quraysh. And that's exactly what he did. And he stood as the men were marching to war, marching to the battle, and recited this poetry, loud enough for both sides to hear. And while someone commented, you're just standing there reading poetry while we're about to fight, Rasulullah ﷺ responded to him and said, his verses will pierce the heart of the enemy more than your arrows. Everyone has something to contribute. How much time do I have? I don't want to be late for Maghrib. Can you give me a... 5 minutes? Okay. The final thing, so we can all go to Maghrib, which is very much more important than what I'm saying. We have to build institutions that outlive us. We have to build institutions that are sadaqah jariyah and that we may never even see the results of. And this is truly walking in the footsteps of our predecessors and our spiritual ancestors. Because building institutions that outlive us is ingrained in our traditions and our history. Any doctors in the room? A few? It's okay to raise your hand. There's no shame in being a doctor. This isn't the fundraising it. I'm just asking a simple question. Well, the first hospital in the world was built in Baghdad in the 9th century. And it included principles of Islamic medicine. One was medical ethics. Muslim physicians followed a certain code of conduct resembling modern medical ethics. This is in the 9th century. There were specialized wards. Hospitals had departments for surgery, ophthalmology, infectious disease, etc. They quarantined people when they were contagious. That was an invention of the Muslims. There was medical education in these hospitals because they served as teaching centers where students trained under expert doctors. And this really blew my mind. There was record keeping. So we might be bad at record keeping now, but we used to be really, really good at it, where there were case histories and patient records maintained for reference and study of each patient. And get this, confidentiality was mandatory. And most beautiful is that it was free. Free healthcare, funded by a waqf. The hospital provided care to all, rich or poor. And I'm going to add one more thing. Muslim or non-Muslim. We hear Baghdad and we hear the 9th century. We think the majority of people were Muslim. Actually, they weren't. Muslims were only about 20% of the population under Muslim rule. So this hospital, mostly, if a representative sample of the population used it, 80% of the patients would have been non-Muslim. The oldest university that still exists is not Oxford or the Sorbonne. It is Al-Qarawiyyin University in Fez, Morocco, which was built in 859 by Fatima al-Fihri, a Moroccan Muslim woman who was credited for founding this university. Now, it started out as a mosque that she was building with her inheritance. Yes, 1,000 years before her European counterparts would inherit. She was using her inheritance to build a university. Again, 1,000 years before her European counterparts would be allowed to attend one. And what was beautiful about this story is that she fasted every day of the building of this, originally a mosque and then became a university. And that really shows us that these good works of building legacy through institutions come out of deep religious devotion. They're not just for my name to be known or whatever. It's because she wanted to serve her Lord, and so she fasted every day of the building to give it barakah and to have it be accepted from Allah. So our goal cannot be to fit in. We were meant to stand out, to serve, to heal, and yes, to lead. This is who we are. The legacy of building institutions to serve humanity is our inheritance. Let us reclaim it. Thank you.